Imagine being banned from using your own tractor, then watching the same people who banned it beg you for help when disaster strikes. That's exactly what happened to me when my HOA's ridiculous rule came back to bite them hard. And let me tell you, it was glorious. I've lived in my neighborhood for over a decade, and it was supposed to be the perfect blend of rural charm and suburban convenience. A place where people could enjoy spacious lots, a tight-knit community, and a little bit of country living. That's why I had my tractor. It wasn't just for show, it was an essential tool. In the winter, I used it to clear my driveway and help my neighbors do the same. In the summer, it kept my property in shape. And let's be real, who doesn't love having a powerful machine that makes life easier? But as with most suburban paradises, there was a catch: the HOA. The Homeowners Association was supposed to keep the community looking nice, but over the years, it had morphed into something else entirely. A power-hungry group run by people who had nothing better to do than micromanage their neighbors. And at the top of it all was Brenda. Yes, that was her real name. And yes, she lived up to every single expectation you might have. Brenda had been HOA president for 3 years, and in that time, she'd made it her personal mission to enforce pointless rules that only seemed to benefit her idea of a perfect neighborhood. You couldn't have a shed unless it matched your house's trim color. You couldn't leave your trash cans out for more than 2 hours after pickup. And don't even get me started on the Christmas decorations ban. But the one rule that really made my blood boil was the no heavy machinery rule. It started with a letter. Dear homeowner, per HOA guidelines, all heavy machinery, including tractors, is prohibited from being stored on residential property. I thought it was a joke. My tractor had been parked in my driveway for years without issue. I used it responsibly. I wasn't tearing up the roads or running it at odd hours. And yet, somehow, Brenda and her cronies decided that my completely legal, useful, and non-intrusive tractor was a problem. I attended the next HOA meeting, fully expecting to resolve the situation with a little common sense. That was my first mistake. The meeting was held in the neighborhood clubhouse, a place that was supposed to be for community events, but was mostly used for HOA power trips. I sat in the back, arms crossed, waiting for my turn. Brenda, dressed in her usual blazer and fake smile, called the meeting to order. Greg, the HOA vice president and Brenda's loyal lapdog, sat beside her, nodding along like he had no thoughts of his own. When my turn came, I kept it simple. I explained that my tractor wasn't an eyesore, it wasn't a hazard, and more importantly, it was necessary for snow removal. Without it, my driveway and several of my neighbors would become completely inaccessible during winter storms. Brenda smiled in that condescending way that made my blood pressure spike. I understand your concerns, she said, which was HOA speak for I don't care. But the board has decided that heavy machinery, including tractors, does not align with the aesthetic of our community. We have a snowplow service for the roads, so private equipment is unnecessary. Unnecessary? Tell that to the elderly couple down the street who relied on me to clear their driveway every year. Tell that to the single mom who wouldn't be able to get her car out after a major snowfall. But Brenda didn't care about practicality. She cared about rules. I pointed out that my tractor was already here and had been for years without issue. But Greg, ever the echo, chimed in, the rule is the rule. If we make exceptions, then everyone will want to bend the guidelines. So that was it. The HOA voted. My tractor was banned. I had 30 days to remove it, or I'd be fined $100 per week. If I refused to comply, they could escalate the fines and eventually slap a lien on my property. I had no choice. I fought it as much as I could, but in the end, I had to give in. A friend of mine had a barn outside town where I could store it. With a heavy heart, I drove my tractor away, knowing full well that this was going to cause way more problems than it solved. Winter came fast that year, but at first, it was mild. A few flurries here and there, nothing major. The HOA was smug, acting like they'd made the right decision. Then, in early January, the weather reports started to change. Meteorologists warned that a historic blizzard was on the way. We weren't talking about a few inches. We were talking about multiple feet of snow, high winds, and dangerously low temperatures. A storm like this wasn't just inconvenient, it was paralyzing. Despite the warnings, the HOA remained confident that their tiny plow service would be enough. After all, they had paid good money for it. They sent out an email reminding residents that personal snow clearing equipment was unnecessary and that they should be patient. But the storm didn't care about HOA policies. When it hit hard. Within hours, the roads disappeared under feet of snow. Power lines snapped under the weight of ice. The entire town was thrown into chaos. By the next morning, everything was frozen solid. People were trapped inside their homes. Cars were buried. And that plow service the HOA was so proud of? Nowhere to be found. Panic set in. People realized they had no way to get out. Neighbors started calling each other, trying to figure out a solution. Some tried shoveling their driveways, but the snow was too deep. The HOA's plan of waiting it out quickly collapsed. Then the calls started coming in. I sat in my living room, sipping coffee, warm and comfortable, when I heard the first knock. I opened the door to see Greg standing there, bundled up like a kid going on his first snow day. His face was tight with barely contained embarrassment. "Hey," he said, clearing his throat. We could use some help." I raised an eyebrow. "Help with what?" Greg shuffled his feet, his pride visibly crumbling. "The roads. The driveways. Brenda's house is completely snowed in. The plows aren't coming. He sighed, finally spitting it out. "We need your tractor." I took a long sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. "You mean the tractor the HOA banned?" Greg winced. "Yeah, that one." I leaned against the door frame, letting him stew in his own words. I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily, not after what they'd done. "Oh, I'd love to help," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But you see, my tractor isn't stored here anymore. HOA rules and all. But hey, good luck with that storm." And with that, I shut the door in his face. This was going to be fun. Greg's face had been priceless when I shut the door on him. He stood there for a moment, probably expecting me to crack and offer to help. When I didn't, he trudged back through knee-deep snow, slipping twice on his way down my driveway. I watched him struggle, sipping my coffee with a smirk. The HOA had made their bed. Now they could lie in it, under 3 feet of snow. I knew it wouldn't be the last time I heard from them. The storm had only just begun. By noon, the entire neighborhood was completely buried. The snow wasn't just falling, it was piling. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling windows and creating monstrous snow drifts that swallowed everything in sight. Cars, mailboxes, even some of the shorter fences, gone. The town power grid, which had always been about as reliable as a politician's promise, finally gave up. One by one, houses went dark. At first, I didn't mind. My generator kicked in automatically, humming to life and keeping everything running. I had food, heat, and most importantly, the satisfaction of knowing that I'd warned these people. The first sign of real trouble came when I checked my phone. The neighborhood group chat was on fire. "Greg, HOA VP, does anyone have updates on when the plows will be here? Roads are still completely covered. Debbie, HOA enforcer, my driveway is blocked. I can't even get my front door open. Who do we call?" Random neighbor 1. "I tried to shovel, but it's too deep. Can't open my garage door either." Random neighbor 2. "Anyone else lost power? Our heater isn't working. It's freezing in here." Then, the best message of all. "Brenda, HOA president, the snowplow company, just emailed me. They're overwhelmed and won't be able to reach our neighborhood for at least 3 days. Please remain calm." I nearly dropped my phone from laughing. 3 days? Oh, this was going to be good. I peeked outside again. The street looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Just walls of snow, no visible pavement, no tire tracks. Cars were stuck where they'd been left, their owners either too late or too arrogant to move them before the storm hit full force. Now, I should clarify, I don't enjoy seeing my neighbors suffer. Most of them are good people, just victims of Brenda's delusions of power. But the HOA board? They deserved every bit of this. As night fell, things got worse. The temperature plummeted into the single digits, and without power, a lot of homes had no way to stay warm. People started to panic. The same folks who had smugly supported the tractor ban were now realizing how much they had screwed themselves. That's when the desperate knocks on my door started. The first was my next-door neighbor, an elderly man named Frank. He had never been a fan of the HOA's nonsense, but he had kept his head down to avoid trouble. Now his heater was out, and his wife was wrapped in 3 blankets, shivering. "Do you still have power?" he asked, his breath visible in the freezing air. I nodded. "Generator. Do you mind if we sit inside for a while? Just to warm up?" Now, this was different. Frank wasn't part of the problem. I immediately let them in, offering them coffee and a seat by the fireplace. As they thawed out, I heard another knock. Then another. Within an hour, I had 4 families camped in my living room. Meanwhile, the HOA board members, who lived in their massive, over-decorated homes, were too prideful to ask for help. Brenda was still sending out emails insisting that everything is under control, even as people in the chat begged for solutions. Then came the breaking point. Sometime after midnight, I was sitting in my kitchen, scrolling through messages when my phone rang. I raised an eyebrow. No one called anymore. When I saw the name on the screen, I nearly choked on my coffee. Brenda. Oh, this was too good. I let it ring a few times before answering. Hello. There was silence on the other end, then a forced cough. We need to talk. I grinned. About what? The roads, she said through gritted teeth. And your equipment. Oh, I said, dragging it out. You mean my tractor? The one the HOA said was unnecessary. More silence. Then she exhaled sharply. Look, I don't have time for this. The plows aren't coming. We need to clear the roads so that emergency services can get through. People are trapped. Sounds rough. Another pause. Are you going to help or not? I leaned back in my chair, enjoying every second. Well, see, I would help, but you made it clear that my tractor was a violation of HOA policy. I wouldn't want to break the rules. Her voice rose an octave. Are you seriously going to let people suffer just to prove a point? Oh no, I said. I definitely want to help. I just think we need to settle a few things first. Brenda hesitated. What things? I smiled. First, I want the tractor ban lifted. Immediately. In writing. There was a long, heavy silence. I could practically hear her chewing on her own pride. Fine. And, I continued, I want a public apology at the next HOA meeting. You and the board will admit that you were wrong. Are you kidding me? I stayed quiet. She grumbled something under her breath, then exhaled. Fine. I wasn't done. And I want the fines refunded. Every single dollar. Her voice was tight, with barely contained rage. Fine. Just get over here and clear the damn roads. I stood up, stretching. See? That wasn't so hard, was it? Before she could explode, I hung up. The next morning, I trudged through the snow to get my tractor back from my friend's barn. When I rolled up to the neighborhood, people actually cheered. The same people who had ignored me before, the ones who had voted with the HOA, were now treating me like a hero. I took my time. I made a big show of revving the engine, slowly plowing through the snow banks, clearing driveways one by one. Brenda's house? Oh, I saved that for last. As I worked, I made sure to wave at her every time I passed her window. She looked like she wanted to murder me. But hey, rules are rules, and I was just following their rules, after all. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the neighborhood was a frozen wasteland. The storm had dumped nearly 3 feet of snow overnight, turning driveways into impassable trenches and cars into snow-covered tombs. A thick layer of ice coated everything, and the wind had sculpted drifts as tall as fences. The temperature had dropped to nearly zero, and without power, most houses had become unlivable iceboxes. Inside my house, everything was fine. My generator hummed quietly, keeping the lights on and the heat running. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, feeling well-rested after a good night's sleep. But outside, it was absolute chaos. People were beginning to realize just how unprepared they were. The HOA's so-called solution of waiting for the plows had completely backfired. There were no plows coming. Not today, not tomorrow, not anytime soon. The town was in a state of emergency, and our little neighborhood wasn't a priority. We were at the bottom of the list, left to fend for ourselves. I scrolled through the neighborhood group chat, which had now transformed into a desperate plea board. Does anyone have a working fireplace? We're freezing in here. My wife is sick, and we need to get to a hospital. Someone help. I can't get my door open. Snow is blocking the entire front of my house. Does anyone have extra blankets? Our house is an ice cube. Every few minutes, new messages popped up, each more panicked than the last. Then, the best one of all. Brenda, HOA president, if anyone has a way to clear the roads, please step up. The HOA is looking for volunteers. Oh, now they wanted help. I stared at the message for a second, debating how petty I wanted to be. I could go out right now and start clearing everything, be the bigger person, and save the day. Or, I could let them stew for a little longer, let the full weight of their mistake sink in. After all, these were the same people who had smugly banned my tractor, the same ones who had handed out fines like candy. I set my phone down and poured myself another cup of coffee. An hour later, Another knock came at my door. I wasn't surprised to see Greg standing there again, his face red from the cold. His usual smug demeanor was completely gone. "Listen," he said, shivering. "This is getting serious. Some people don't have heat, and others are running out of food. We need the roads cleared. We need you." I leaned against the door frame. "Oh, I thought personal snow clearing equipment was against HOA policy." Greg clenched his jaw. "Brenda said she'll reverse the rule. Just help us, man." I pretended to think about it. "I'm going to need that in writing." Greg blinked. "You're joking." I raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Without another word, he turned and trudged back through the snow, slipping on a patch of ice as he left. A few minutes later, my phone dinged with a new email from the HOA board. It was short and to the point. Effective immediately, the restriction on personal heavy machinery for snow removal is lifted. I chuckled. That was the fastest policy reversal in HOA history. Now that I had what I wanted, it was time to get to work. I grabbed my gear, layered up, and hopped in my truck, heading out to retrieve my tractor from my friend's barn. The drive was slow and treacherous, but once I finally made it there and started up the tractor, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. When I returned to the neighborhood, people were already outside, eagerly watching as I rolled in. Some waved, others actually cheered. It was hilarious. These were the same people who had supported the HOA's dumb rule just weeks ago. Now they were acting like I was a hero. I made a big show of it, revving the engine dramatically before pushing the first wall of snow out of the way. The tractor roared to life, cutting through the drifts like butter. Slowly but surely, I started clearing the roads, carving paths between houses, uncovering driveways, and freeing trapped cars. But there was one house I didn't clear, Brenda's. I passed by it several times, always slowing down just enough for her to see me. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight line. Her driveway was completely buried, and she wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. Some of the other neighbors noticed what I was doing. One even came up to me and whispered, "Dude, you're not going to clear hers?" I smirked. Not yet. I kept working, plowing through street after street. By mid-afternoon, most of the neighborhood was accessible again. People started emerging from their houses, helping each other dig out porches and walkways. The mood had shifted. It was less of a crisis now and more of a community effort. Then, finally, I made my way toward Brenda's house. I took my time, slowly clearing a path to her driveway, deliberately making her wait. When I finally reached the front, she stepped outside, bundled in layers, her face a mask of forced politeness. "Thank you for helping," she said stiffly. I turned off the engine and climbed down. "Oh, I'm just following HOA policy." Her eye twitched. "We really do appreciate it." I folded my arms. "I'll clear your driveway. But first, I want a public apology." Brenda's face flushed. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said, loud enough for the other neighbors to hear. "You forced me to remove my tractor, fine me for having it, and now you want my help. I'll do it, but you need to admit, right here, right now, that you were wrong." A few people gasped, others smirked, clearly enjoying the show. Brenda's face twisted like she had swallowed a lemon. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she muttered, "Fine. You were right. The rule was misguided." I cupped a hand to my ear. "Sorry? What was that?" "I didn't hear you." She glared at me, her jaw clenched. "I said you were right. The HOA was wrong. The tractor ban was a mistake." I let the moment hang in the air before nodding. "See? That wasn't so hard." With that, I climbed back onto my tractor and cleared her driveway in a matter of minutes. As I finished up, I noticed something beautiful. Neighbors were shaking their heads, talking amongst themselves. The tides were turning. The HOA had lost its grip. This was just the beginning. The moment Brenda choked out that apology, I knew I had won. She had spent years lording over this neighborhood, enforcing pointless rules, and making life miserable for anyone who dared question her authority. But now, she was at my mercy. And nothing, not her title, not the HOA's so-called power, not even her pride, could save her from the fact that she needed me. But I wasn't done. Clearing her driveway was just the start. The real revenge? That was going to be delicious. After finishing her driveway, I parked the tractor right in the middle of the street, leaned back in my seat, and stretched, making a big show of taking my time. A few neighbors had gathered around, watching the scene unfold like it was the best entertainment they'd had in years. Brenda stood on her porch, arms crossed, still scowling. Are you just going to sit there? I smirked. Yep. Her nostrils flared. Why? I pulled out my phone and checked the time. Oh, I'm just waiting. Waiting for what? I grinned. For you to send an email to the entire neighborhood, officially reversing the tractor ban. Publicly. Her face turned red. I said the rule was lifted. Yeah, but that was just to me, I said. I want everyone to see it. She looked like she wanted to argue, but she was trapped. If she refused, I could just leave, and she'd be snowed in again. If she sent the email, she'd be admitting to everyone that she had been wrong. I could see the internal battle playing out in her head, but in the end, the choice wasn't really hers. She stomped inside, and a few minutes later, my phone dinged with a new email notification. From Brenda, HOA President. Subject, Policy Update, Snow Removal Equipment. Dear neighbors, due to unforeseen circumstances, the HOA is officially rescinding the restriction on personal heavy machinery for snow removal. We recognize the importance of community support during extreme weather conditions and appreciate everyone's cooperation. I let out a short laugh. Unforeseen circumstances. That was a fancy way of saying, we screwed up and need to cover our butts. I turned to the neighbors watching the spectacle unfold. Well, folks, looks like we're officially allowed to own tractors again. A few people clapped. Someone actually cheered. Brenda stepped back onto her porch, glaring at me. Happy now? I pretended to think about it, tapping my chin. Almost. Her shoulders slumped. What now? I want my fines refunded, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. Every single dollar. There was a collective, oh, from the neighbors. They love this. Brenda, however, looked like she was about to burst into flames. That's not up to me. The board. I held up my phone. You're the HOA president, and as president, you can authorize refunds. She opened her mouth, then closed it, looking around as if searching for backup. But Greg and Debbie, her usual enforcers, weren't anywhere to be seen. They had abandoned ship the moment things got bad. Finally, she sighed. Fine. I refreshed my email. A few minutes later, another message arrived. From HOA Treasurer. Subject, Fine Reversal Notification. Your previous fines have been rescinded. A refund will be processed in the next billing cycle. I grinned. See? That wasn't so hard. Brenda looked like she wanted to launch herself at me, but she was too frozen, both literally and figuratively. I gave her a mock salute, revved the tractor one last time, and cleared the last of the snow from her walkway. As I was finishing up, a few neighbors approached me. You know, said one, a guy named Bill who had mostly stayed out of HOA drama. We should probably talk about getting her out of office. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, she's been running this place like her personal kingdom for years, another neighbor chimed in. I think it's time for a change. It was music to my ears. Over the next few days, as I continued helping dig people out, I noticed a shift. People who had been too afraid to speak up before were suddenly voicing their frustrations. They were done with Brenda's reign of terror. A petition started circulating, one to remove her as HOA president. And the best part? I didn't even have to start it. The petition spread like wildfire. One by one, signatures poured in. It wasn't just about the tractor ban anymore. It was about years of unnecessary fines, ridiculous rules, and over-the-top enforcement. People were angry. Brenda tried to do damage control. She sent out emails insisting that she had always acted in the best interest of the community. She even went door to door trying to sway people. It didn't work. By the end of the week, the petition had more than enough signatures to trigger a recall vote. At the emergency HOA meeting, it was standing room only. Brenda sat at the front, arms crossed, trying to maintain what little power she had left. When it came time for the vote, the results were overwhelming. 81% voted to remove her. She was done. When the decision was announced, she stood up, shaking her head in disbelief. This is a mistake, she muttered. No, someone called from the back. The mistake was thinking we'd put up with you forever. People actually applauded as she stormed out. The new HOA board was elected that same night, and the first thing they did? Roll back half the ridiculous rules Brenda had put in place. The best part? The neighborhood decided we needed an emergency response plan for future storms. And guess what piece of equipment they voted to purchase for the HOA? A brand new tractor. When they asked if I wanted to be the one to operate it, I just smiled and said, oh, I'd love to. As long as it doesn't violate HOA policy. Everyone laughed. Brenda, by the way, she put her house up for sale the next month. She couldn't handle living in a neighborhood where she wasn't in control. I made sure to plow an extra large snowbank in front of her for sale sign before she left. Just for old time's sake. The moment Brenda stormed out of that HOA meeting, a weight seemed to lift from the entire neighborhood. People who had been afraid to speak up before were suddenly laughing, shaking hands, and exchanging stories about how much of a nightmare she had been. It wasn't just about me and my tractor anymore. Brenda's fall was a victory for the entire community. But while the HOA drama had taken center stage, the reality was that the storm had left serious damage in its wake. Even with the roads partially cleared, the neighborhood was still struggling. The snow was relentless. The storm had moved on, but the aftermath was brutal. Temperatures were still dangerously low, and many homes were without power. Elderly residents were stuck in freezing houses. Families were rationing food, and a few unlucky folks had burst pipes, turning their basements into frozen swimming pools. That's when I realized clearing the roads wasn't enough. If we were going to survive this storm together, we needed more than just plowed streets. We needed a full-scale rescue operation. I pulled my tractor back into my driveway and sent a message in the neighborhood group chat. Me. All right, folks, the roads are clear, but we've still got a lot of people in trouble. If you have power, heat, or extra supplies, let's start helping our neighbors. Who needs assistance? Within minutes, messages flooded in. My grandmother's stuck in her house, and she's running low on medicine. I've got food but no heat. Can anyone take my family in? We lost power, and my dad's oxygen machine isn't working. We need to get him somewhere safe. I wasn't the only one stepping up. Bill, the guy who had helped start the petition against Brenda, offered his home as a temporary warming shelter. A couple of other neighbors volunteered their houses too. People with four-wheel drive vehicles started carpooling, picking up stranded residents and bringing them to warm houses. It was beautiful. For the first time in years, the neighborhood actually felt like a community. But there were still some major problems. First, the local emergency services were overwhelmed. The town's main roads were still clogged, and first responders couldn't reach us. That meant we had to handle things ourselves. Second, some of the elderly residents were completely cut off. Their front doors were blocked by snow, and even though I had cleared the roads, they still couldn't get out. That's when I had an idea. I sent out another message. Me. I've got the tractor. If anyone knows of someone who's trapped in their house, let me know. I'll start clearing doorways and driveways. My phone exploded with responses. I started with Frank, the elderly guy who had asked to warm up at my place the night before. His house was almost entirely buried. I had to use the tractor just to make a path to his front porch. When I finally cleared the last of the snow, he stepped out, bundled up in layers, shaking his head. "Son," he said, clapping me on the shoulder, "if I had a daughter, I'd make her marry you." I laughed. "Appreciate it, Frank. You good to get to Bill's house for heat?" He nodded. "Already packed a bag." From there, I went house to house, plowing through snow banks, freeing trapped families, and making paths for people to evacuate safely. One house had a pregnant woman who had been stuck inside for 2 days with no power. When I finally got to her front door, her husband nearly hugged me. "Dude, I was this close to breaking a window and climbing out," he said. Another house had a family with a newborn baby. They had been wrapping the baby in layers of blankets, but their house had dropped below freezing. I cleared their driveway and personally drove them to one of the warmed-up homes. Everywhere I went, people were offering help, sharing supplies, and looking out for one another. Even Greg, the former HOA VP, tried to get involved. He came up to me, rubbing his hands together. "So, what can I do?" I smirked. "You got a shovel?" "Yeah." "Great," I said, gesturing to a snowed-in house. "Start digging." To my surprise, he actually did it. Maybe even he had finally realized that Brenda's power-hungry nonsense wasn't worth it. By the end of the day, we had rescued over a dozen families, moved everyone into homes with heat, and gotten a few of the most vulnerable folks to a nearby shelter that had emergency power. Just when I thought we were done, another message popped up. There's a family trapped in their house at the end of the cul-de-sac. They have no phone signal. Someone just saw them waving from the window. That part of the street had the worst snowdrift. Even the tractor struggled against the sheer weight of the ice and snow, but I pushed through. When I got to the house, sure enough, a woman and 2 kids were standing at the window, waving frantically. The father was trying to force the front door open, but it wouldn't budge. I jumped out of the tractor and started shoveling by hand. After a few minutes, the dad managed to shove the door open just enough to squeeze through. His eyes were wide with relief. "We thought we were stuck for days," he said. "I didn't know how much longer we could last." "You're not alone," I told him. "Let's get you out of here." I drove them to Bill's house, where a warm meal and a working heater were waiting. By the time the town finally got around to plowing our roads 2 days later, the crisis was already over. We had saved ourselves. The funny thing? This whole time, Brenda hadn't lifted a finger. She had spent the entire ordeal holed up in her house, only emerging once everything was already back to normal. When she finally did come outside, I was finishing up plowing the last bit of snow in front of my house. She walked up to me, her arms crossed. "I suppose you expect me to thank you," she said. I smiled. "Nope." Her lips pressed together. She looked around, realizing that her power over this neighborhood was officially gone. No one was listening to her anymore. I climbed onto my tractor, looking down at her. "But I do expect you to move out soon." She scowled. "You're insufferable." I revved the engine. "And you're unemployed." Then I rolled away, leaving her standing there in the snow. The neighborhood? We were stronger than ever. And as for me, well, I had a feeling that no one was ever going to question my tractor again. With the neighborhood roads cleared and the worst of the crisis over, things finally started returning to normal. Well, almost normal. There was still the matter of the wreckage left in the storm's wake: collapsed fences, damaged roofs, and frozen pipes. But there was one thing that had changed permanently. The HOA's grip on the community was broken. For years, Brenda and her little band of rule enforcers had bullied homeowners into submission. But now, people had seen what true leadership looked like, and it wasn't the kind that came in the form of ridiculous fines and power-hungry control freaks. It was real neighbors helping each other. And Brenda? She was sinking. Ever since the recall vote that kicked her out of power, she had been desperately trying to claw her way back into relevance. But the truth was, no one cared what she had to say anymore. The final nail in her coffin was the petition to abolish several of the HOA's worst policies, including the ridiculous fines for things like trash can placement, the ban on personal lawn equipment, and the restrictions on holiday decorations. The meeting where those rules got overturned? Let's just say it was glorious. It was held in the same community clubhouse where Brenda had once ruled like a queen. But this time, instead of her usual smug confidence, she sat silently in the back, arms crossed, watching helplessly as everything she built crumbled before her eyes. I had taken a front row seat, enjoying the show. The new HOA president, Bill, who had been one of the first to support the effort to remove Brenda, stood at the podium. "All right, folks," he said, looking over the crowd. "We have a few major items to discuss tonight. First on the agenda, removing the fines for using personal equipment to maintain properties, including snowblowers, tractors, and lawnmowers." A thunderous cheer erupted from the crowd. Brenda? She looked like she was about to combust. The motion passed unanimously. Next item, Bill continued, abolishing excessive fines for minor infractions, including trash can placement and driveway decorations. Another round of applause. Greg, the former HOA VP, who had been suspiciously quiet ever since Brenda's downfall, raised his hand. "I think we should still have some basic guidelines to maintain the neighborhood's aesthetic." Bill nodded. "That's fair. But it should be guidelines, not punishable offenses." The new policies passed with overwhelming support. And then came the final piece of poetic justice I had been waiting for it all night. One of the older residents stood up, a woman named Mrs. Reynolds, who had been in the neighborhood longer than anyone. She adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. "I have a proposal," she said. Bill gestured for her to continue. "I propose that Brenda officially steps down from the HOA board entirely and is barred from holding any future leadership roles." You could have heard a pin drop. Brenda's mouth fell open. "You can't do that," she sputtered. Mrs. Reynolds simply shrugged. "I checked the bylaws. With enough votes, we absolutely can." I almost choked from how hard I was trying not to laugh. The vote was called. It wasn't even close. Brenda was out. Permanently. When the results were announced, she shot up from her chair. "This is insane. You're all turning against me just because of him." She pointed directly at me, her face turning a lovely shade of rage-induced purple. I just smiled and gave her a little mock salute. The room erupted in applause as Brenda stormed out, slamming the door behind her. It was over. Brenda had lost. And I had won. But the best was yet to come. A few days later, I noticed something interesting in the neighborhood. A real estate sign had gone up in Brenda's yard. She was selling her house. The news spread like wildfire. People in the group chat lost their minds. No way. She's actually leaving. Best thing that's happened to this neighborhood in years. Who's throwing the goodbye Brenda party? Of course, I couldn't resist having a little fun. The night before her moving trucks arrived, I made a special delivery. I took my tractor and plowed a massive snow bank in front of her for sale sign. It was completely buried. I made sure it was packed in tight, so she'd have to dig it out by hand. The next morning, as she stomped outside in her signature fury, she took one look at the massive pile of snow and screamed. I watched from my window, sipping my coffee, as she hacked at the ice with a plastic snow shovel, getting nowhere. She must have spent hours out there before finally giving up and calling a removal service. And you know what? She deserved every second of it. Once Brenda was gone, the neighborhood finally felt like home again. People were actually talking to each other instead of just worrying about who was going to get reported for some minor infraction. The new HOA actually listened to the community instead of making up nonsense rules. And the best part? The HOA bought a brand new community tractor for emergency snow removal. And guess who they asked to be the one to operate it? Yep, me. Bill approached me at the next meeting. Look, man, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. We all saw what you did for the neighborhood. And we were thinking, if you're willing, we'd love for you to be in charge of snow clearing from now on. I grinned. As long as I get to park the tractor right in my driveway. Bill laughed. Deal. That winter, I cleared the roads without having to fight the HOA. Neighbors thanked me instead of fining me. And for the first time in years, our community felt like a community again. A few months after Brenda moved out, I got a message from an unknown number. Brenda, I hope you're happy. You ruined everything. I stared at the message for a moment, then I typed back. Me. Nah, I just made it better. And with that, I blocked her number and went back to enjoying my life. No fines, no stupid rules, no HOA tyrant. Just peace, quiet, and a damn good tractor sitting right where it belonged. Winter finally melted away, and with it, so did the last remnants of Brenda's reign. By the time the first buds of spring appeared, the neighborhood was a completely different place. More alive, more connected than it had been in years. Gone were the petty fines, the power-hungry enforcers, and the constant fear of violating some arbitrary HOA rule. In its place was something better, a real community where people actually helped each other instead of reporting one another over nonsense. And let me tell you, living here had never been better. One of the first things the new HOA did after Brenda's departure was set up a community emergency response plan. No more relying on outside services that might never come. No more waiting around for the town to clear the roads days after a storm. We had our own system now. Bill, our new HOA president, called me up one afternoon. Hey, he said, we've been talking and we want to set up a winter response team for the neighborhood. I was intrigued. Go on. We were thinking, he continued, we could train a group of volunteers to handle snow removal, power outages, and emergency supplies. You'd be our lead guy for equipment. That is, if you're interested. I barely even had to think about it. You're telling me I get to officially plow the neighborhood every winter, and no one's going to fine me for it. Not only that, Bill said with a chuckle, but the HOA will actually pay you for it this time. I grinned. Now that is an HOA policy I can get behind. So that's how I officially became the neighborhood's first emergency snow removal operator. And this time, it wasn't just me. The new HOA approved the purchase of a second tractor, stored in a community garage. We even had a volunteer crew of people trained to help clear the roads whenever disaster struck. It was everything Brenda said was unnecessary, and yet here we were, making sure no one ever got stuck in a storm again. The ultimate irony. But you know what really put the cherry on top? One afternoon a few months later, I was out mowing my lawn when I saw a moving truck pull up to Brenda's old house. A young couple stepped out, looking excited to be in their new home. I wandered over, leaning against my fence. New neighbors. The man smiled. Yeah, we just bought the place. Moving in today. The woman looked around, taking in the scenery. It's so nice here, she said. Everyone seems so friendly. I laughed. Oh, you have no idea. Then, right as I was about to introduce myself properly, I noticed something glorious. The couple walked over to the moving truck, and from the back, The movers pulled out a brand new, bright green John Deere tractor. I nearly fell over laughing. The guy noticed my reaction and grinned. Yeah, we heard about the big snowstorm last winter. Decided to buy this baby just in case. I wiped a tear from my eye. Oh man, if you only knew how perfect that is. They raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. I just shook my head. Don't worry. You'll find out. Welcome to the neighborhood. Not long after the new neighbors settled in, I got a text from a random number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. Brenda, I see they let you take over the HOA. I hope you're happy. You turned the neighborhood into a joke. I stared at the message for a moment before bursting out laughing. This woman really had nothing better to do than sit in whatever miserable new town she had moved to and stew about losing her precious HOA throne. I didn't even bother responding. I just sent her a picture of the brand new tractor parked in my driveway, blocked her number, and went back to enjoying my life. Months passed, and before I knew it, winter was creeping back in. But this time, there was no panic, no arguing, no ridiculous HOA meetings about approved snow removal policies. Nope, this time, we were ready. The first snowfall of the season came in fast. Not as bad as last year's blizzard, but enough to cause trouble. The difference? Within an hour, my tractor was out, joined by our second plow. Volunteers were already clearing the sidewalks. Neighbors were outside laughing, drinking hot coffee, and helping each other dig out driveways. Instead of a neighborhood full of people waiting helplessly, we were taking care of our own. At one point, Bill walked up beside me, watching as we cleared the road. Crazy how much things have changed, huh? I smirked. Crazy how easy it was once we got rid of the dead weight. He laughed. Amen to that. And as I drove my tractor through the streets, clearing paths that no one could find me for, I realized something. For the first time in years, this neighborhood actually felt like home. And Brenda? She was just a bad memory, buried under the same snow she once swore we didn't need a tractor for. So what do you think? Do you have an HOA horror story? Have you ever seen karma hit someone this hard? Let me know in the comments. And if you loved watching an HOA go down in flames, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because I've got plenty more stories where this came from. See you in the next one.